I'm sitting here about to eat, and I just had something I wanted to share. And I haven't pre-planned. I haven't written all this out. This isn't some stage thing. As you can see, I'm just sitting, eating my lunch. And if you could see where my camera is, it's right now set up on a tissue box with my wallet supporting the tissue box because apparently my phone's too heavy. But I wanted to share something with you guys. And I want to kick it off by looking at Oreos. How do you like your Oreos? Are you one that likes to separate it? To eat them in separate settings, to twist the top off and eat them like that. Now, many people like eating it like that. I much rather prefer just it all mushed together. Even though there's separate ingredients and separate things, I love an Oreo just in all its glory mushed together. And this has gotten me thinking about the Christmas story. So often our nativity sets and the Christmas movies that we watch of the birth of Jesus, we mush in this story. We put it all together into one cohesive package. But that's not what we find in the biblical story when we dive into it. We find these two different stories in Matthew and Luke. One seems to be told from Joseph's perspective in Matthew, and then in Luke it seems to be told from Mary's perspective. And even with the stories we're told, we kind of add things in. Like in Matthew's gospel, there's no mention of a taxation to go to Bethlehem. There's no mention of any of that. There's no mention of an angel visiting Mary. There's no mention of Mary and Joseph having a discussion. It starts us off by telling us that Joseph is thinking of separating, of finding a way to get out of the marriage before it takes place. And then an angel comes to visit him. And even with the wise men come not on the night Jesus is born, but if we're following the story, they would have come well after that. And we don't know how many wise men. We like to say there were 3 kings, and we even give them names. But nowhere in our story do we find that. Nowhere in our story do we find for sure that they were kings. Nowhere in our story do we hear these wise men named. Nowhere in our story do we get told how many they are. We just assume 3 because there's 3 gifts. So we had to put something with that story. But it's so interesting because there's so much we don't know. And then Herod, when he kills all the babies, he kills babies 2 years and younger. To make time with when the wise men were with him and sat with him and told him these things. Which means the wise men could have met Jesus when he was a toddler. But yet in our nativity set, we have the star and the shepherds and the wise men and the animals there together. And even in Luke's story of Jesus' birth, we often like to have a donkey that Mary rides, which makes sense, but our story doesn't say Mary ever rode a donkey. Now, of course, she could have, and we had to put in some way for her to get to Bethlehem. And even the whole taxation situation, scholarly, that's a wrestle. But it's funny to me how we imply so many things. We make sure there's a donkey that gets Mary. We even have a movie set up about the donkey getting chosen to carry Mary to Bethlehem. But in our Christmas story in Luke, we don't find that. The shepherds get told of the night of Jesus' birth and come to witness him. And we often make it out that Jesus was born in a stable, in a barn. But when we look at this ancient culture and this ancient time, their homes archaeologically weren't built like that. Their homes were probably built with a lower level, like a garage or a barn, where the animals and the people hung out together. And then above that level were where the people slept. So when there's no room in an inn, it means there's no room in anyone's upper level. So yes, Jesus was born next to animals, but it wasn't in some barn out of sight. It would have been someone's garage below their house, in a sense. And we don't know about a manger. There's so many things we don't know, but we put all this mushing together to make the story more coherent, which I love. I've already said I love my Oreo all stuffed together. But I think there's something beautiful if we can read the gospel story, if we can take time and read it in its separate parts. Because Matthew and Luke are each telling us an amazing story about Jesus. They're telling us the birth of Jesus in a different way because it goes with the story they're trying to tell us about Christ. And sometimes when we mush it all together, we miss some of the beautiful stories they're trying to tell us, some of the beautiful things that we encounter in the birth of Jesus. So I want to encourage you this Christmas to read the birth stories that we find in the Gospels. And it's only in Matthew and Luke. Mark doesn't write about it, and John goes all mystic and talks about the Logos, the Word becoming flesh. But Matthew and Luke write about the birth story, and they write about them both differently, and they're both beautiful. So I want to encourage you to get lost in this story. Still enjoy it all mushed together in the Christmas stories that we tell. Because that's common for us to fill in the gaps, for us to connect it, to us to mush things together. But there's something beautiful if we're able to separate it and enjoy each section. So I want to encourage you to do that this Christmas. May God's grace and peace be with you.